I've been wrestling with purpose. What was I created for? I'm more than what you see on the surface. See, beneath my skin and scars, I'm skinned and scarred, marred and twisted, scarred by the past. I need to be lifted, and sometimes I question my own existence. What was I put here for? In my seams, it seems that there seems to be more. It's like I'm a light unplugged from the socket. I mean, do I really exist to put money in my pocket? This 9 to 5 feels like a 9 to 9. My mind entwined, I pass the time. Life circles me as I wait. What is my estate? I feel like I was made for something great, and yet I can't quite put my finger on it. But when I look at my fingers and I see their design, I realize I'm one of a kind. And something created me. No, someone created me. And that someone made me for a reason. Even though it's clear the past years have been treason, I still sense this drawing, this calling. That even in the midst of my falling, there is someone who died to pick me up, someone who rose to fix me up, someone who's coming back to lift me up. And that someone is Jesus. See, God made me for a purpose. And when I delight in Him, it's brought to the surface.
So today's message is all about what Dakota just shared. It's all about how we're all made by God and destined to do great things with our lives. We're starting this new 5-week series today called Beautiful Strength, Stories of Great Women in the Bible. And way too often, the stories that we share are usually the stories of great men in the Bible. They're the ones that get highlighted. But we want to honor some of the great women in the Bible, while at the same time we honor all the great women who are part of this faith community called Cornerstone Boulder. You women are a vital part of this community, from our staff to our administrators, to our lay leaders, to our volunteers, all you women who work at home raising kids, all you women who work outside of the home, women who are pursuing higher education. You are the solid rock core of this faith community, and bless you, and we honor you in this series. So during this series, we plan on highlighting some of the women that make up this faith community that match the women that we're going to cover in this series. And the 5 women that we're going to cover begins today with Esther's journey of faith and fate, followed next week by by butt-kicking Deborah. Boy, what a piece of work she is. I would like to meet her. She breaks all of the stereotypes about women, particularly women back in the day. We're talking like, 5,000 years ago. Followed by the next week by a very successful entrepreneur named Lydia, who had a business selling purple cloth. Somehow or another, she made a whole business out of purple cloth. How about that? And she raises the glass ceiling for women. Then on Palm Sunday, we're going to look at Mary of Bethany, who anoints Jesus' feet with a very expensive bottle of perfume and during Passion Week. So she exemplifies the strong faith that comes so easily. It seems to come so much easier for a woman than for a man. And then finally, we'll finish up this series on Easter Sunday by looking at Mary, Jesus' mom, who was tasked with this incredible supernatural birth and nurture of the Messiah of Israel. How'd you like to have that as your role in the story? And she was with her son at every phase of his life, including his death and resurrection. So it's going to be an awesome series. And we're going to kick it off today by looking at Esther's journey of faith and fate. The book of Esther, of course, is where we get the Feast of Purim. And I happened to be in Israel the 10 days leading up to Purim, and I had planned on being back here to celebrate our Purim party last Saturday night, but my flight got canceled on Friday night in Israel, which means I couldn't get out. They didn't get the part until the next day. And so, unfortunately, I had to stay in Tel Aviv for the first night of Purim. I know. In Tel Aviv, the entire city transforms into one big giant party as people strut down the street showing off their costumes, stopping off at pubs to celebrate this joyous festival. And I took some pictures and I made a little collage so you can see kind of what it's like. Here it is. I like this guy. Of course, can you click to the next picture? Of course, I don't know if you could tell, but that's my friend Carl. We're in costume. You can tell what we are. We're beer-drinking American tourists. So, and everybody noticed that right away. So, I like Esther. You know why I like Esther? Because she's not the perfect woman, but she is perfect for the task that God lays before her, which makes her so much more relatable. Like all the other imperfect Bible characters of the Bible, in the Bible, it just makes her easier for us to relate to. The book of Esther begins between right around 483 BC, almost 50 years after the Jews were allowed to return to Israel from their 70-year exile in Babylon. By this time, the Persian Medes are now in control of this vast empire, and it was believed that there were over 1 million Jews living in Babylon when King Cyrus the Great allowed them to return back to the Promised Land. But of those 1 million Jews living there, less than 50,000 choose to join that first return, with only a small dribble returning in the subsequent years to follow. Now, if you recall, when the exile first began, the prophet Jeremiah said this to them. This is Jeremiah 29, 4 through 7. It says, "This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon." Here's what he said. "Build houses, settle down, plant gardens, eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number, do not decrease. Seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you will prosper too." And settling in and prospering is exactly what they did. So much so that most of the Jews chose to remain living in prosperous Babylon when they were finally free to return back to their homeland. By the time Esther comes on the scene, some 50 years later, King Xerxes is in control, and Esther is at best, she's 16 years old. She's probably more like 14 when she's recruited into the king's harem. And since it's been around 125 years since the exile took place, it most likely was Esther's grandparents, maybe even her great-grandparents, who were exiled from Israel, which means that her parents were either just little kids at the time or they were actually born in Babylon. Either way, that would make Esther at least a second-generation Jew born in Babylon, maybe a third or even a fourth-generation Jew. But whichever it was, Esther was born into one of the majority of Jewish families who chose to remain living in the diaspora rather than making aliyah, rather than returning back to Israel. At some early point in in Esther's life, both her parents die, and an older cousin named Mordecai takes her into his home and raises her. And it seems to me that by the time we encounter Esther in this story as a teenager, She is what we would call an assimilated Jew. An assimilated Jew is a Jewish person who's become immersed into the culture and practices of the country that they're residing in the diaspora. As an assimilated Jew may not consider them, may not connect to their Jewishness. They may not think that's important, but if they do, they typically only connect to the traditions of their Jewish faith and not to the practice of their strict observance of their faith. And so this appears to be Esther's situation. We're told that her Hebrew name is Hadassah in Esther chapter 2, verse 7, but that's the last time we ever hear that name again, because at this point on, from this point on, she's referred to by her Persian name, Esther. And it wasn't uncommon in the diaspora for Jews to adopt or even be given new names. If you recall, Daniel was assigned the name Belteshazzar by the Babylonian official. But as we'll soon see, there's a stark contrast between Esther's faith in the diaspora and Daniel's faith in the diaspora, because Daniel would rather die than compromise his faith. While in the beginning of the story, Esther doesn't seem to put any resistance to compromise at all. So when I was coming back from Israel, you go from the flight I was on goes from Tel Aviv, and then it goes to Newark, and then from Newark to Denver. So on my flight from Newark to Denver, I sat next to this couple, and we all were like super high techies. We all had our little gadgets and our wireless headphones, and everybody had their own. We're all watching either movies or doing something. And there wasn't a whole lot of time for us to talk in this 4-hour flight. But at one point, the man next to me, whose name is Nathan, took his headphones off, and I took my headphones off. So I said, Nate, I said, are you going home or are you going on vacation? He goes, yeah, we're going to Telluride to go skiing. I go, awesome. You ever been there? No, we're looking forward to it. He said, what about you? I said, well, I'm going home. And it's been a long journey. He goes, well, where are you coming from? I says, well, I started in Israel. And he said, oh, Israel. I've been there many times. I go, really? I go, why would you go to Israel? He goes, well, I have family in Haifa. I go, family in Haifa? You're a Jew? Yeah, you're a Jew. I go, well, I'm Jewish. He goes, awesome. He says, what were you doing there? And I said, well, it's a long story, but I'm Jewish, but I'm also a pastor. And he just went cross-eyed. And I told him about Cornerstone. And he just got more confused as we got into the discussion. And I said, I know there's not really a file folder for what we do. But he says, I have a million questions. So he did for about an hour. He just, one after another, started asking me great questions. We had an incredible conversation. When it was done, I said, well, what about you? How would you describe yourself? What kind of a Jew are you? He goes, I'm Orthodox. I go, you're Orthodox. Okay. And I kind of giggled, and he says, what? I go, Nathan, where's your kippah? He goes, I know. And I go, and it's evening, where's your tallit? Why aren't you doing your prayers? Yeah, I know. I go, and your tzitzits, where's your tzitzits? He goes, yeah. And I go, Nathan, you're flying on Shabbat. I mean, come on, give me a break. And we're laughing. He goes, well, we Orthodox come in a lot of colors. And I go, not the Orthodox that I know. It was really a great conversation. I'm pretty sure if you asked Esther, she would describe herself as a devout Jew. But in reality, her faith was pretty nominal because her life had become very assimilated into the Persian culture. And I would imagine that she connects more to the traditions of the Jewish faith than she does to the daily observance of her Jewish faith. More like a vague idea of God rather than a daily personal relationship with God. And this is why Esther is a woman who is so relatable, because most of us are at the same nominal place in our faith journey prior to that moment when something happens to kick our faith into high gear. How many of you found God during a time of crisis in your life? How many? I see, like most of us, that's how it works, all right? And how many of your lives changed because of that new faith in your life. Yeah. That moment is coming for Esther. And I'm hoping that that moment might come for a few here, a few of you that are here tonight. So we're told that in Esther chapter 1, verse 3 and 4, that in the 3rd year of King Xerxes' reign, which would have been, like I said, 483 BC, he threw a very long and very wild party for his male officials. This party lasted, are you ready for this? 180 days. Had plenty of alcohol flowing the entire time. If that wasn't enough of a party, we're told in verse 5 through 8 that at the end of this 180 days, the king invites all the men in the town of Susa to join the party for another 7 days, and they can drink whatever they want, as much as they want. This is a wild bash of an incredible magnitude. 187-day non-stop drunken frenzy, and never in my wildest BC days. Y'all know what BC means? Maybe for me it's BM. Before Messiah? Right, okay. Never in my BC binging days of drugs and alcohol did I ever party anything that even comes remotely close to what's going on here. And at the end of this 7 days, when King Xerxes and everybody else is wasted beyond belief, can you imagine what kind of shape they're in 187 days later? At the end of this 187 days, we're told that the king tells someone to go get Vashti and have her come and present herself in front of these drunken men to show off her beauty. Can you imagine even for a second how degrading that would feel for any woman to parade herself in front of a huge rowdy group of drunk men like this? And the king tells Vashti to come wearing her queen's crown. And some people believe he meant to come wearing only her crown. But whether he meant for her to come fully clothed or naked, Queen Vashti's response to the king's humiliating request is, "Oh, hell no." I love this lady. I mean, good for Queen Vashti. She seems to be a woman who is very secure with herself, and she's not about to compromise her self-respect and her dignity no matter what it might cost her, and it could have cost her life. But it ends up costing her her crown. She lives, but she pays a huge price for her stand. Ousted now as the Persian queen, but listen to this, forever engraved in the pages of the Hebrew Scriptures as a hero and a great role model for women of all faiths and ethnic backgrounds. When you tell the story of Purim to your children, don't forget to highlight Queen Vashti as a woman worth emulating for making a costly stand for her self-respect and dignity. Now, without a careful reading, when you get to the next chapter, it would appear that there's an immediate search for the king to find a new wife and a new queen. But if you read later on in chapter 2, you're going to find out that that search doesn't happen for 4 years later. We read from ancient historical sources that shortly after this drunken bash, King Xerxes launches a 4-year failed campaign against the Greeks. And we find the king at the beginning of chapter 2 in the first 3 verses looking like he's a little depressed about the failed outcome of his military campaign. He's definitely feeling nostalgic about the relationship he once had with Vashti. And after 4 years of waging war, he's definitely feeling lonely. And so, sensing the king's depression and loneliness, one of his attendants suggests throwing a beauty contest in order to find a beautiful young virgin to be the king's new wife and queen. And these gals are already drop dead gorgeous. But they're given 12 months of daily beauty treatments. How'd you like this, ladies? This part is kind of cool, all right? 12 months of spa treatments, oils and creams and special foods and perfumes, all designed to make you look even more attractive on the outside. And Esther is just one of possibly hundreds of beautiful young virgins chosen. Although it's not clear that a woman could refuse this assignment, we don't see any protest from Esther to enter the beauty contest, no protest to eat the king's non-kosher food, no protest when it's her turn to spend the night with the king. All activities that would be inconsistent with an observant Jew. And in addition, her Jewish cousin Mordecai, who also has a Persian name, tells Esther in verses 10 and 11, don't tell the king you're Jewish. But I love it that he goes every day to check on her to see if she's okay. And when it's her time to spend the night with the king, King Xerxes ends up falling in love with Esther, and she is chosen from all the rest to become his new wife and his new queen. Enter, this is your part now, enter into the story, wicked Haman. This is so cool. This happened all 3 services. If you're visiting Cornerstone, you're probably going, what's this inside thing? You know, I doubt that there's another church that's filled mostly with non-Jewish people that would know to boo whenever Haman is made. But this is what you do when you tell the story, the Purim story. Good job. I'm so proud of you. All right. Where was I? In chapter 3, Haman becomes the king's right-hand man. I missed that. Was it good? Oh, more booing. Okay. Yeah, your job's over. Okay. So the king commands everyone to kneel down when Haman enters a room, but Mordecai refuses. And when asked by some of the royal officials, why are you refusing to kneel, Mordecai only tells him that he's a Jew, which means that he's not completely assimilated, all right? Haman becomes furious, but he's not content just to deal with Mordecai. He convinces the king to exterminate the entire Jewish race living in the Persian Empire. That's all the men, all the women, and all the children. That's a lot of people. The Persian Empire was huge. It ranged all the way from the north around Russia, all the way down to North Africa, to the east, all the way to India, and to the west, all the way to the Mediterranean Sea, and even into Europe a little bit. So we're talking about most, if not all, of the Jewish population on the planet during that time. King Xerxes makes a public edict, but verse 15 tells us that the citizens of Susa are bewildered. Don't miss that little detail. Because the Jews had become so much a part of their culture. The Persians were not anti-Semitic people back then. They loved having the Jews as their friends and neighbors. And even today, there are still many Jews living in modern Persia. It's only been in recent years, with the rise of radical Islam, particularly in Iran, that most of the Jews have left that region and have opted finally to return, make aliyah back to Israel. It's kind of interesting. Mordecai sends word of this edict to Esther, who appears to be uninformed. And in chapter 4, verse 8, he instructs her to visit the king to beg for mercy on behalf of her people. But in verse 11, Esther responds by reminding Mordecai that no man, no woman, including the queen, can visit the king uninvited without being put to death. They only had one law about this, and the only punishment for violating that law was death. So Mordecai, in turn, tells Esther 3 important facts in verses 12 through 14 that will become a game-changing moment for Esther's faith in so many ways. Here they are. Number 1, he reminds Esther that she's Jewish too and is naive to think that she will escape death. Number 2, he reminds her that the Jews are God's chosen people, and that if she chooses to do nothing, God will eventually send a deliverer, as he has always done in the past. And he doesn't know this yet. We'll always do in the future. But number 3, and more important than all the other 2, Mordecai tells her that maybe you are the deliverer for such a time as this. For such a time as this. We're talking about where faith and fate intersect. And it's a game-changing moment for Esther. I'll tell you why in a second. Ever hear the phrase, there's no atheists in foxholes? You've probably heard that before. That's why I asked, how many of you found faith in a crisis? How many of you changed the course of your life because of that new faith? This is a pivotal moment in Esther's life as she comes to terms with who she is, who God is, and the purpose that God made her for such a time as this. Esther's response to Mordecai in verses 15 and 16 is indicative of someone who has just discovered a newly found faith and faith. This is the first time in this book that we hear of anything religious at all, and it's Esther that begins it. She says, "Go gather all the Jews who are in Susa. Fast for me. Do not eat or drink anything for 3 days, day or night." So we're talking about a complete 3-day fast. "I and my attendants will fast as you do. And when this is done," she's trusting that when this is done, this will open up the door for her to visit the king. "When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it's against the law." And this is the most amazing part. And she says, "If I perish, I perish." Wow. This is a totally new Esther. She was already a beautiful woman on the outside, but now she is beautiful inside and out. And as this fresh, radical faith rises up within her, Esther is empowered to live out the destiny that God put her on earth to do, even if it means losing her life in the process. King Xerxes, however, is delighted to see Esther when she presents herself to him. And when she reveals that she is a Jew, along with the concern that she has for her own people, Xerxes spares the Jewish people and instead puts evil, here's your part again, Haman, to death. All right, good job. It's an amazing journey of faith for an amazing woman named Hadassah. That's her real name. It means myrtle. It's from the myrtle tree. Myrtle tree is sweet smelling, but if you taste it, it's very bitter. It's kind of interesting that was her name. So I've invited Emily Goud to come up here. Did I pronounce that right? Goud. Goud. God. I think I got it right every time before except that time.
No. You
Really?
did it wrong every time. But I didn't correct you, so.
Welcome to my world. The first time I introduced Aaron here, I introduced him as Aaron Wardell.
That's what I call him.
Yeah, it's Wardle.
No, it's more fun to say Wardell.
Okay. So I asked Emily, I knew a little bit of...
What was that?
I knew a little bit about Emily's story, and I thought that it really matches quite a bit of Esther's story. Because I know that, like, in your early years, your family and yourself kind of attended church but had a very nominal kind of faith. So let's hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I grew up going to church. It was what we did on Sundays. Both my parents went to church growing up. We are Episcopals. They would both still say that they are Episcopals, although I don't know that they have any faith. But very much this is what we do on Sundays. My mom didn't go to church with us because she had done that growing up, and now it was our turn. And then at some point, my brother had to get a tutor, and so he couldn't come to church. And then my dad stopped going, and I said, "Listen, not only am I not going to church alone, you can't make me wear a dress. Not doing it." And in that, there was no faith, no conversation about anything spiritual or about the Bible. We didn't read a Bible. There's probably a Bible somewhere in that house. because we're Episcopal, so we have to have it. But yeah, I mean, there was no conversation, no depth, nothing past that Sunday morning that actually had anything to do with spirituality or religion or anything.
So at some point that changed for you. Years later, tell us what happens that life or faith begins to spring in your life.
So that was around middle school. In high school, I became an atheist on purpose. And that was through some classes I was taking, but also through brokenness and anger, and just kind of decided religion is dumb and spirituality is stupid. And Jean said hell, so I can say those words here. But in that, came to college and in Boulder and met Jesus.
My word's biblical, though.
I bet mine are too. You just need to read a little deeper into the cultural context of the words. But yeah, I came to Boulder and met Jesus. So atheist, come to Boulder, meet Jesus. It's real normal. If you didn't believe in miracles, here I am. But in that, I, my freshman year of college, met some Young Life people and thought they were nuts, and sat one of them down and told her she was in a cult, and I was really worried about her. She assured me she wasn't, but then I kind of followed her around and asked her a lot of questions. I think partially out of concern for her, but also my own heart was starting to kind of come alive. And through that, became a Christian, then became a Young Life leader. I think my mom still thinks it's a cult. Was on staff for a little bit. But then I walked away from the Lord for a few years, and kind of the impetus that brought me back was this event happened in my life, and I had a 3 month long anxiety attack. And the only thing that would bring me any peace was reading scripture. I was really upset about it. I didn't like Jesus. Anytime someone would say Jesus, I would want to punch something and vomit at the same time. So this whole reading scripture thing was really not what I wanted, but for 3 months during that whole time, I proclaimed it over myself. I didn't believe it, read it every day, didn't feel it, but just fought and said, no, I'm just going to stand on this because I have no other option. And that led to an intimacy that was deeper than anything I had ever experienced with God.
That's a crazy story. I love it. So, all right, so kind of a nominal beginning. Faith kind of comes to life. You walk away for a little bit, and now it comes on with a vengeance. But at some point, faith and fate intersect because you're kind of doing something that God made you to do. And I use that word in both sense. Like you're made for that, and He makes you do it, right? And
yes.
People understand when you tell them. Let's hear a little bit about that.
I've run the Reverence Movement, and we work with homeless women here in Boulder County. And I met the guy who started it. A friend of mine told me I wasn't working, and she told me to call him and ask him what he was doing. So I called him and said, "What are you doing?" And he then spent the next hour telling me his whole life story, and eventually got to what he was doing. But I got off the phone, and I just knew that the Lord was saying, "Plant your feet here." I was like, that sounds like a stupid idea. I know nothing about homeless people. I've never talked to a homeless person. I really think that I was blind to homeless people, homelessness. I really didn't see that ever, even though I know I saw it. I mean, I know that they were there, but it never just kind of didn't even come in. So when I felt like the Lord was saying, walk here, I was just like, well, this is insane and nuts, but okay, Lord. And then about 1.5 years ago, the guy and his wife that started Reverence Movement left, and again felt the Lord was saying, I want you to take this over, and I want you to lead it, and I want you to keep going, and I'm going to grow it and change it through you. And I, again, thought he was nuts. I all of a sudden was in charge of a nonprofit, which means business, and I had zero experience with that, and I had to write a nonprofit budget, and I had never written a personal budget. And that was still true today until about 2 hours ago when I wrote my first personal budget in my life. But I just remember all of these things just being like, I don't know how to do any of this. I have not been equipped for this. And the Lord was like, and I remember telling people, I don't know what I'm doing. And the Lord said, that's not true. You do know what you're doing because I've taught you, and I will continue to teach you. And so now I get to do this job where I wake up every day and just get to go, God, what do you want me to do today? Is this still where you're planting my feet? And I have joy and life, and I'm doing things that I never wanted to do and sometimes still don't. But mostly I'm just amazed at the things that I love to do that I never thought would ever be in my life.
Yeah.
And women's lives are being changed, and they're meeting Jesus. And even today, my back went out this week, so really, you might perish if you follow the Lord. But today, I got to work today, and the women were like, how are you? How's your back? Like, do you need anything? And just to know that, like, it's not just, I have this and I can give it to you, but it really is this place where we're empowering and teaching, and, it's a back and forth.
And you do amazing work. I mean, really,
Some days.
Even today, I met yet another girl who was here, who came up in tears, telling me how important that is to her, and to be able to have a second chance in life. And it's an amazing ministry. You're an amazing woman, and it's an amazing story. Thank you for sharing it.
Thanks, Gene.
You guys can come out from around the corner. So, I hope you enjoyed Esther's story. I hope you enjoyed Emily's story. I hope you enjoyed Dakota's spoken word. They're all meant to do the same thing, to kind of stir you a little bit. So maybe you're that person like me, maybe 25 years ago, coming to a church. Usually if you're coming to a church, there's something going on in your life to bring you. Unless you're like Emily, you're young and your parents are dragging you there. You're here because you're kind of either maybe exploring faith, trying to figure out if God's really real or not. And maybe you could be here tonight in that situation. And I hope that tonight is like one more step, maybe even a big step, into turning on that thing that you can't turn on yourself. None of us can turn it on. God turns it on at some point. It's all about timing. Or maybe you've already made that step and you're trying to say, well, but I still haven't figured out what God has made me to do. Now listen, there are some things that we are encouraged to do or commanded to do that are things that we've got to do every day. Good things, wholesome things, right? But I also believe that there is this thing that God made us for in this lifetime, that at some point faith and fate intersect, and it's just a matter of timing. Two of the verses that really speak to me about this, the first one is Psalm 139, and here it is up on the screen. For God created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. And then here, all the days ordained for me were written in your book. When? Before one of them came to be. God can see the future. He knows what's around the corner. Esther was clueless. She's just a teenager living her life in Babylon. Had no idea this was coming down the pike. And neither do you. But God does. And then Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8 through 10. For it is by grace that you've been saved through faith. You can't do this yourself. You can't work your way to God. You can't make it happen. It's just a gift that God gives you. And then that last verse, for we are God's handiwork, created in Messiah Jesus to do what? To do good works. When were they prepared for us? In advance for us to do. You know what the message is tonight? Chill out. Don't work so hard to figure things out. It'll find you. Just like it found Esther. Until that time, do those things you know to be true and wholesome and good. To make this world a better place. Do the work to change you from the inside out, to look more and more like Jesus every day. Live with your hands wide open. Trust in the Lord. Don't lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge Him. And what will He do? He'll make your path straight to that place where you want to go. Let's stand up and let's sing about it.